Thankfulness has never really been too much of a difficult emotion for me to express. But I will say in this season of reopening, after we had been closed for so long, I find myself in really negative headspace. I feel like our community is often still going through a lot of grief and sadness about what isn't. Church without singing, man, it stinks. Church without masks or with masks makes it harder to read each other's emotions. It took me a long time to learn your names because I could only see your eyeballs. Church without some of our more vulnerable people, our older adults, our younger kids that are medically compromised. Our church feels emptier sometimes. And too many times, my brain often starts thinking this way. How many of you get into that negative cycle of thinking? Yeah, okay, good, I am not alone. And especially as I've been coming to work this past week, our annex is empty. We moved everything out of the annex that is ours. Even yesterday, while we were painting my office, also, if you see people with flecks of paint on their head, you say, I'm so sorry that you hit your head in Jessie's office. Because turns out those slanted ceilings are very tricky and we still have paint in our hair. If you have tricks, let me know of how to get paint out of my hair. But I kept thinking about how, oh man, are we just shrinking? Are we just moving down to one building? I'm sure many of you have maybe had that thought too. And so in the midst of this transition, all of a sudden we find ourselves at Thanksgiving. And I realized that I needed to slow my roll when it came to my negative thinking. And so I wanted to share with you guys 3 moments that have been incredibly beautiful and full of gratitude that I've experienced in the midst of these changes. Because what I came to realize over this past week is that we're moving, but we're giving space to the Spirit to move, to grow, to change our collective lives in our church. We're taking a breather. We're giving ourselves the financial space that we need in order to rent the annex. We're giving ourselves space to grow. And that was a huge game changer. Because for a while it felt negative, but it's not. So I've been grounding myself in these grateful moments. And as the psalmist that Deb read for us, as the psalmist most likely written by David, sings out that there is stability and joy and safety in our Lord. God creates a way out of no way. And we are truly shown the path of life when we are grounded in God. So here are my 3 stories. The first story happened in the process of getting signs for our church building. I remember when we moved in, it took a while to get the little sign that said, "Welcome, Pastor Jessie," which was awesome because Jay climbed up on a ladder to do that. And then I realized, well, we have no other way of letting people know that we're open. So I reached out to a person at Fast Signs. His name is Bill Carter. And I was so surprised at how excited he was. When I talked to him on the phone, he shared with me, he was like, oh my goodness, one of my family members used to come to this church. This is incredible. And I stopped and I heard and I began to focus on the used to part of that sentence. Do any of you do that? Or you go, oh, great. Thanks, Bill. Used to go to this church. But then I was pulled out of that negative space because he went on and he said, oh my goodness, I love driving by your building because it's historical and it's absolutely beautiful. I love the way your property looks. I've always wanted to put signs up on your church because I drive by it every day and I love you guys so much. What? I was like, Bill Carter, you are pulling my leg. And then in that moment, I realized that this history of this congregation is deep and rich. This church has been around for 150 years, which means at one point in time, Probably almost every single person in Vancouver has meandered in and out of this space. How incredible is that? And I was overwhelmed in that moment with a sense of gratitude for those who have gone before us, the people in our lives that have stepped foot in this building and have changed our congregation for the better. And when I look out onto you all, I think of the exact same thing. Gratitude for this space will never be the same because you have stepped foot in this place. The second story is from our partners across the way, from Fish, the food pantry. When we were reopening and trying to figure out how to celebrate with one another, we had a rally day barbecue to celebrate in September. And it was amazing because it gave me the excuse to go over to Fish, introduce myself, check in. And then it was probably about 2 months of me stopping by every week to go, hi guys, I'm the new pastor. Hi, it's so nice to meet you. And eventually I ended up meeting Rex, who is the president, and Dee, who is the vice president of the fish pantry now. And I realized that about a week ago, I walked outside of the church building and I locked myself out. As an aside, women's clothing really does need more pockets. That's my own soapbox. But I realized all of a sudden it was going to be an hour before Deidre showed up at the office. What do I do with that hour? So I thought about it. It was starting to rain. It was really cold. I let myself into the little storage area off of the parking lot because I know the combination to get in there. And I started organizing. And then I was like, what am I doing in this darn space? I got to go and check in with my neighbors. So I wandered over to the Veterans Affairs group, the building users that are across the way. And I realized that I said hi to at least 5 people that I see every week because they walk past our church. And every time I see the group, I stick my head out the door and I go, hi, Veterans Affairs crew. And they go, hi, Pastor Jessie. It's very lovely. So I went over and I got to spend time with them. And I was like, okay, I've killed about 20 minutes. I have 40 minutes to go. What shall I do? And then I realized, Fish is open. I could go over there and volunteer. So I went over and I checked in with those guys and I realized I was putting together the food baskets. And then these women were like, well, you know what, Pastor? We just really need coffee. I was like, okay. And they're like, could you make us coffee? And I had a moment where as I was sitting down and drinking coffee with these women, these volunteers that have been there for over decades of volunteering at this food pantry, we started to reminisce about how Fish actually started here at Orchards. Did you know that? The food pantry started here. Now, I didn't really think about the impacts of that until I was talking to the volunteers, and they started sharing that all of a sudden they were able to serve so many more people because they changed spaces. They were able to start taking care of their community. They were able to offer more consistent office hours. They were able to start serving their community in a better way. And we launched them. And it was one of the hardest things because I had another moment where I went, well, they used to be in our building, but they're not anymore. And then I realized the gift of what that meant. That this church's heart was so big that we started a food pantry. And it grew so big that we couldn't have it in our building anymore. How cool is that? The gratitude of this space and the people once again washed over me. The third story about gratitude has to do with our home. I'm not sure if many of you know this, but our church, Orchards, owns a parsonage or a home, a piece of property. And that means that Thomas and I get to live in it. When we first got the call to be appointed here, that I got called to be appointed here, and that meant Thomas was moving with me. Our immediate reaction was nervousness about housing. I know that many of you have probably gone through this recently. The renting in our economy has been rough. Finding homes and apartments that are affordable. We have a 2-wage earning life, and yet rent is hard. It was hard for us in Eugene. And we all of a sudden were like, well, we're not ready for a metro area. Holy moly, the prices have skyrocketed. And so when we were considering this job, I had a moment where I would talk to the DS and she said, there is a home here for you. And I about cried. And as we moved in, having a home has been incredible. It's been amazing to talk to our neighbors, to walk down the street and say, hey guys, how are you doing? And check in with their dogs and see how they're doing. And there's a history of this parsonage. I'm focusing on the good history of the parsonage. Not that many people have been shot in our home. It's fine. If you need to know more about the story, we'll talk about it over some turkey this afternoon. But what's incredible is we meandered down the street and we saw someone that was cleaning off his fishing supplies. And we stopped and talked to him, and I asked him about his catch. Thomas was embarrassed because I was talking to a stranger. It happens. It was a half an hour conversation. It was. And he started sharing about how he had lived in the Truman / St. John's neighborhood for like 3 decades. And he remembers the pastors that have lived in that house. The Maddoxes that live next door, they delivered us cookies and they said, we are so glad you're here. We're so glad you're here. I didn't know at the time why. No, I'm kidding. But they were so grateful. And in fact, I had an incredible conversation with them. They called me about our cats. And I was very perplexed because we now have 2 tuxedo cats that are indoors. And the Maddoxes called and they said, we think we see your cats. I said, okay, what's going on? And they're like, but we don't want to yell at them. What? So I said, okay, where are these cats? And they said, well, the cats are in our backyard and we're trying to make sure that our cats don't get into fights with other cats. So we want to make sure that your cats don't get into a fight with our cats, but we don't want to yell at your cats and make them feel unwelcome. What? I was like, Maddoxes, are you kidding me? No one ever asked about our cats' well-being in Eugene. And we had neighbors that were much closer. All of these stories I share with you because there is a deep history of gratitude and gratefulness and thankfulness and joy that comes from this place. When I thought about celebrating Thanksgiving with you today, I got giddy like a kid. I was so excited to think about eating a meal with you. We haven't had a potluck in this space in like 2 years. It has been a long journey, and yet we're here together. We're still able to be with one another. We've worked so hard to take care of each other in these last 2 years. It has been hard work. Many of us have felt isolated. Many of us have felt incredibly sad. And yet we're still here. And for that, I am deeply grateful. And so I sing at the top of my lungs, like King David did. Joy to the Lord and joy unto my neighbors. They are a wonderful lot. To that, I say amen.